And so some of our staff are here to assist you should you need some emotional support. They can be seen wearing the dark blue t-shirts with the Hear Our Voices logo, and if I could just get you to stand up so people can see who you are. Several of them, they're over by the big monitor on your left. There are also within your program book resource numbers that are available should you wish to reach out and contact someone after the event. I would now like to invite Elder Barbara Nipanak to the podium to deliver a land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Miigwech. My name is Tutan Berluman. I'm from the Bear Clan. It is an honor to be asked to be here today to welcome people here and to bring greetings from our people. We are on Treaty 1 territory, the land of my ancestors, the Anishinaabe people, the Cree, Witchin Cree, the Dakotas, the Dene, homeland of the Métis. And I personally would like to welcome all your ancestors and yourselves, the settlers, to Treaty 1 territory. That is the right thing to do for us as part of reconciliation. I embrace you, and I hope you have a successful evening for today. And I'm so honored that I've been asked to come here to do this land acknowledgement. And it assures me that people are doing the right thing, and you and I are doing the right thing by being here today. Miigwech, itanamay ko.
Thank you, Barbara Miigwech. Although he was unable to attend this evening, and he wanted to attend this evening, we're now going to hear some greetings from Israel's ambassador to Canada, Ido Moed. I turn your attention to the monitors.
Dear community members and esteemed guests, it is my honor and pleasure to be with you today and to celebrate the strong and enduring bond between our two nations. Before I proceed, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to the Jewish Child and Family Services of Winnipeg for their generous hosting of this event. Their unwavering support is a testament to the solidarity that exists within our communities and shows the steadfast commitment and dedication of Jews within their communities to help one another, even in times of crisis. I would like to thank Ayelet Razin Bet Or for her presence here today. Since the horrors of October 7th, Ayelet has raised her voice to speak for Israeli women and girls who have gone through unimaginable horrors. She has done that in Israel, in the United Nations, and around the world, raising awareness to these horrific crimes. We are so proud of you. At this critical moment, it's important to amplify women's voices who have been one of the most impacted groups in the wave of Hamas terror attacks. The numerous reports and confirmed cases of gender sexual violence specifically against women, men and children is something that must be condemned worldwide. Today, even 3 months later, we still have international and women's organizations who have not fully or even partially acknowledged the scope of these horrors. It is completely unacceptable and shameful. We have all come to know Naama Levy, who was pushed bleeding into a jeep by Hamas monsters. Naama is still kept hostage in Gaza, subjected to more violence as we learn from freed hostages. We must all unite in the call for her and the rest of the hostages' immediate and unconditional release. It is crucial that we create a platform for their voices to be heard, acknowledge the impact of gender and sexual-based violence on their lives, and demand that the international community join the efforts to investigate and prosecute those who have perpetrated and continue to perpetrate such horrific acts. My heart, like many other Jewish and Israeli hearts, is still heavy in mourning as we acknowledge the somber reality of the situation in Israel. The ongoing crisis has brought unimaginable challenges to our people, and it is essential for us to stand united in times of hardship. This is why I believe coming together as a community in the face of adversity is so critical. We extend our deepest sympathies to those affected by the conflict, and we remain hopeful for a peaceful resolution that brings stability and security to the region. Let us join hands and work together towards a society where Jewish communities are empowered in the face of rising anti-Semitism, where their voices and experiences are not only heard but valued. Together, we can make a difference and contribute to building a more just and compassionate society for Israelis, Jewish Canadians, and Jewish women everywhere. Thank you once again to the Jewish Child and Family Services of Winnipeg for their support, and to all of you for being here today. Your presence signifies a shared commitment to a better future for all. Shalom, and may our efforts bring about a positive change. Am Yisrael Chai.
So I had the pleasure a few months ago at a meeting organized by the Jewish Federation of Winnipeg to meet Deborah Lyons. Deborah is a former ambassador of Canada to Israel, to Afghanistan, and she is now Canada's Special Envoy for Holocaust Remembrance and Combating Anti-Semitism. And I can say this is a person who not only has warmth and approachability, but she is taking this matter and her portfolio extremely seriously. And we welcome her here live from, I believe if you're in Ottawa or Toronto, I'm not sure, Deborah, but you're right there, to bring greetings live.
To everyone from snowy Ottawa. Bonsoir à tous. Before I begin, I would like to take a moment and, of course, acknowledge the Winnipeg Jewish Child and Family Service for all the support that they provide to Manitoba, especially through this very deep and troubling time that we are all going through. I had the privilege of visiting Winnipeg just last November, soon after I was appointed as Special Envoy. And both the importance of your work and the impact of your work were very clear to me, and I'm honored that you invited me to be with you all tonight to give a few opening remarks. Of course, it's always wonderful to have a chance to spend another evening with Gail Axford. And Ayelet, I really look forward to your insights tonight, and I also look forward to seeing you in Israel someday soon. So as incredible as it may seem, last week marked 100 days since the horrific October 7th Hamas attack. 100 days of captivity for hostages, even including baby Kafir Biba, who celebrated his first birthday as a hostage in Gaza. 100 days of agonizing pain for the Jewish community in Canada and indeed around the world. But we haven't even had the opportunity to mourn, to go through the incredible pain of the loss and the shock, due to another incredible shock, the spike of anti-Semitism that we have seen since October 7th, both here in Canada and around the world. And it has manifested, of course, in many different forms. We have seen it as intimidation and incitement on the streets, intimidation on our university campuses, online, verbal and physical attacks, and Holocaust distortion and denialism, to name just a few. And as unimaginable as it may seem, we've also seen anti-Semitism take the form of refusing to believe Jewish women who were sexually assaulted by Hamas terrorists on October the 7th. The silence and the significant delay to condemn these heinous attacks is seen right across society, as we all know. We've witnessed it from community and faith leaders, government officials at all levels, international organizations, and perhaps even so painfully, even from women's rights advocates. I can't help but ask myself two questions. Why? And where? Where do we go from here? The why is unfortunately easier to answer. The refusal to believe Jewish women who were sexually assaulted on October the 7th is a clear form of anti-Semitism, plain and simple, and as well, a sad reminder that misogyny still lives. Reactions to the horrific gender-based and sexual violence was met with silence and denial at a time when it should have been met with outrage and meaningful action and response. This reminds us that anti-Semitism impacts all Jews, regardless of age, sex, gender, race. So the silence around October the 7th is indeed harmful and hurtful in its own right, as well as being a very dangerous, slippery slope towards undermining women everywhere. If Jewish women aren't being believed, women everywhere aren't being believed. If Jewish girls aren't being believed, girls everywhere aren't being believed. We must continue to speak out. So where do we go from here? That's a much more difficult question to answer. But I know that we must learn from these events and ensure that we do a couple of things. One, continue to use our voices to speak out on the horrific events that transpired on October the 7th and call for the release of all hostages, some of whom may in fact shed further light on the sexual and gender-based violence that ensued. We cannot let this go. And secondly, we need to continue to raise our voices on this egregious case of Jewish women not being believed. This event tonight is very important, and I am truly honored to be part of it. But we need to continue tomorrow. And I can assure you that I will continue to amplify this issue. And I encourage all of you to do so, to amplify the issue and to find ways to take action. To that end, I want to mention that a letter was sent to the Prime Minister from a group of senior women leaders in Canada. Kathleen Wynne, former Premier of Ontario, and Lisa Raitt, former political person in her own right. Along with a number of other women. In the letter, they spoke out about this issue, and they asked the federal government to support the women who were sexually abused and to support the government of Israel in their work. I want to report, in fact, I was going to read to you from the letter, maybe I'll just send it in the comments, but the Prime Minister responded by saying that he was directing two of his ministers to follow up, that Canada would be providing RCMP expertise, technical and financial support to the government of Israel in this investigation, and most certainly to the ongoing support to the victims of this sexual assault. We need to continue to push for action like this. And so, the timing of tonight's event is especially relevant, with International Holocaust Remembrance Day coming on Saturday, January the 27th. And yes, never again is now, but we must also highlight that never again means never again to be silent, and never again to be indifferent. You are about to have a most inspiring evening ahead of you with Gail and with Ayelet. I'm honored to be part of it this evening, and I look forward to getting back to Winnipeg soon. Thank you all so much for your support. continue to work together.
Thank you, Deborah. I would now like to invite to the stage Jeff Lieberman, CEO of the Jewish Federation of Winnipeg, for some final greetings.
Thank you, Al. On behalf of the Board of Directors and the staff of the Jewish Federation, we're honored to be partners with the Jewish Child and Family Service for this very important evening. This evening is a call to action, a rallying cry for solidarity and empathy with those who were affected by the sexual and gender-based violence perpetuated by Hamas on October the 7th, which will forever be remembered as the darkest day for Jewish people since the Holocaust. More than 1,300 innocent people were murdered in the communities of southern Israel. Thousands more were wounded, tens of thousands were traumatized, lost loved ones, and were forced to flee their homes. So many families have been shattered, never to be whole again. Those affected are not statistics or numbers. They are mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters whose lives were normal 1 minute and forever changed minutes later by the most barbaric acts of evil that the world has seen in recent memory. Life for these people has not yet returned to normal, and for some, it never will. At the end of November, I joined fellow CEOs from the other Canadian Jewish federations, along with community leaders and a few politicians, on a solidarity mission to Israel. While in Israel, we met with parents of hostages and family members of those that were killed on October the 7th. We visited Sderot and met with the mayor who told us that his city, with a population of 36,000, now has 3,000 people living there, and it's a ghost town. We toured Kibbutz Kfar Aza, where many people were murdered and hostages were taken. We could still smell the burning as we walked through the kibbutz. We were also able to see how the monies raised during our Israel emergency campaign are being spent. We are proud that the Jewish Federation of Winnipeg's Israel emergency campaign has raised over $4.2 million, with every penny raised going to Israel. However, the needs in Israel are great, and they will be for a long time. If you want to help and donate, please contact us at the Jewish Federation of Winnipeg office. Believe me, you'll feel good when you do that. We are here tonight because we stand for human rights and dignity. The pain of separation, the uncertainty, and the suffering endured by around 130 people still held in captivity affects all of us as we await any news about their safety and release. We are so fortunate to be able to hear Ayelet Razin Bet Or, noted women's rights expert and former director for Israel's Authority for the Advancement and Status of Women in the Ministry of Social Equality, in conversation with Gail Asper, a visionary, respected Winnipeg lawyer, philanthropist, and chair and trustee of the Asper Foundation, reflect on the sexual and gender-based violence of October the 7th that has gone largely unrecognized by the global community. The world's silence on this is deafening, and the global community must no longer turn a blind eye to the suffering of the hostages in Gaza. The conditions experienced by those being held by Hamas are beyond belief. As reported in the Times of Israel yesterday, a hostage that was freed from Gaza told lawmakers that women still being held by terrorists in Gaza are being raped and feel as though they have been abandoned. What a truly sickening and heart-rending situation. World governments, including the Government of Canada, must step up, keep the pressure on, and actively support and advocate for the release of these individuals, and we will continue bringing attention to their plight and pressing for action to end their suffering. We must continue to not be silent and ensure that the stories of the victims are acknowledged and heard. We must unite against the insidious forces that perpetuate sexual and gender-based violence. Thank you for joining us in this crucial conversation, for your unwavering support, and for breaking the silence. Never again means never again.
Thank you, Jeff. So why? Why hear our voices? Why is this program and this particular topic so important? As we've heard, on October 7th, we all awoke to the terrible news in Israel, a breached ceasefire, and the horrors of the Hamas terror attacks. But as the hours and the days passed, more and more details began to unfold. We were barraged with the rising death tolls, news of missing loved ones, abducted hostages, and graphic content, and then information about the violent acts on the level of barbarism. We remain in shock, and we continue to mourn all of this. In Winnipeg, JCFS is the agency that supports the emotional well-being and the mental health of our Jewish community, some 15,000 strong. We offer counseling, mental health, addiction services, services to seniors, newcomer settlement, spiritual and chaplaincy supports, services to Holocaust survivors, child welfare, financial empowerment, food security, and more. But as the news from Israel emerged, the world saw an ensuing rise of hate and anti-Semitism, including right here in Winnipeg. People in our community were scared, anxious, stressed, confused. And so JCFS Winnipeg, with the support of the Jewish Federation, sprang into action to respond and offer assistance for those directly and indirectly impacted. Those supports ranged from individual drop-in counseling, group debriefs of agency Jewish professionals, therapeutic wellness activities targeting specifically impacted populations like Holocaust survivors, Israelis, and other newcomers, and more. But as the gender-based atrocities began to be reported, we also watched as the world was silent. And many even denied, and continue to deny, the amassing evidence of brutal rapes, torture, mutilation, and other acts of sexual violence inflicted on women and others during these attacks. Our hearts broke, and they remain broken. As mental health professionals, we immediately shifted our focus on how these atrocities and the world's silence would impact Israeli women, Jewish women here in Canada, and in fact, in all of the diaspora. As a father, my heart is broken. As a man, my heart is broken. As a Jew, my heart is broken. And as a human being, my heart is broken. Do we stand firmly against gender-based violence as a collective? Or are some females now viewed as somehow less deserving of empathy, of validation, support, or action? How does the silence in the wake of these attacks impact our girls and our women? Do Jewish women matter? Today, this evening, we will bear witness to those facts, and we will bring voices to the countless victims of the attacks of October 7th. And today, we do this here in the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. I can think of no better place or a more appropriate location for this event and this discussion than in this sacred space. I want to thank all of you who are here tonight and those watching via the live stream. You are allies for women everywhere. You are feminists, and you can make a difference. A special thank you to Razin Bet Or, to Gail Asper, the Hear Our Voices Planning Committee, and they worked very hard over the last 6 weeks or so. The sponsorship of the Jewish Federation of Winnipeg, the Asper Foundation, the Jewish National Fund, Manitoba and Saskatchewan region, along with all of our JCFS staff, the many volunteers, partners, supporters, and donors who helped make this event possible. Also a thank you to Nick Rav for his photography this evening. Keith Levitt is here as well, taking pictures, and to Barry Kay and Cherry Tree Productions for all your AV and technical support. So now you'll join me in welcoming Ayelet and Gail, who will help shed light on this difficult but very important topic. The sexual and gender-based violence of that fateful day in October, the single greatest tragedy impacting the Jewish people since the Holocaust, and the impact that violence continues to have. It's now my pleasure to tell you a little bit about our moderator, Gail, and our guest speaker, Ayelet. The truth is, Gail Asper doesn't really need an introduction. She's the chair of the board of the Asper Foundation, a private charitable foundation based here in Winnipeg and established 40 years ago by her father, Israel Asper, of blessed memory. Its focus is on Jewish and Israeli causes, as well as education, human rights, social services, the arts, and the general community. Gail is a lawyer, and from 2003 to 2023 served as president of the Asper Foundation, where she led the efforts to establish this Canadian Museum for Human Rights, Canada's 5th national museum, and the first to be established outside of Ottawa, our nation's capital. Gail is an active community volunteer and fundraiser, working with groups like the Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre, United Way of Winnipeg, this Canadian Museum for Human Rights, the Jewish Federation of Winnipeg, and is currently on the board of Winnipeg Shari Zedek Synagogue and the Board of Governors of Hebrew University of Jerusalem. She has received many awards for her community service, including the Order of Manitoba and the Order of Canada. Thank you, Gail, for participating this evening and for standing with JCFS and with women everywhere. It's also my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Ayelet Razin Bet Or. Ayelet is an Israeli lawyer and the former CEO of Israel's Authority for the Advancement of the Status of Women. As a criminal lawyer, Ayelet worked as a prosecutor working with victims of sexual and gender-based violence. She also served as the legal advisor and head of policy and public relations for the Association of Assistance Centers for Victims of Sexual Assault in Israel for 5 years. Ayelet has over 2 decades of experience in the field of law, legislation, and public action for women's rights and the protection of victims of sexual abuse. Most recently, she led a women's leadership delegation to New York City on behalf of the World Zionist Organization and initiated the advocacy events at the United Nations on the war crimes committed by Hamas against women and children on October 7th. Following Ayelet's address, Gail and Ayelet will share some open conversation here on stage. So please join me in giving a warm Winnipeg welcome to Ayelet Razin Bet Or.
Wow, so many of you, and I actually have already friendly faces that I recognize in the crowd. And thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Ayelet, And before commencing with this evening's presentation, I want to take this opportunity to express my deep, deep gratitude to the Jewish Child and Family Services for coordinating this important event, and to the Winnipeg Jewish community for inviting me to be here with you tonight. And a special warm toda rabba to Einat, and to Gail, and to Al. You are amazing friends, and I'm so glad I met you. Thank you for organizing all this. And thank you to you, audience, for coming on this cold evening. Well, it's not cold for you, right? It's a hot evening for you guys, right? So coming here physically, I'm so happy to see you. And for the many people joining us online, thank you all. I am here today to ask you to bear witness with me, with us. I know it's hard. It is a burden. But it's our duty to ask you, I'm asking you to join me in making our voices being heard. Being silent is not an option. In the face of terror, silence is complicity, and we cannot be quiet. That's why we're all here. We are here to speak about unspeakable acts. And I am here especially to talk about the atrocities aimed at women. But not only. Throughout history, women's bodies were considered part of the spoils of war. But the cruelty, intensity, premeditated crimes of war aimed at women on the Black Saturday of October 7th is unprecedented. The voice of the women of Israel, the raped, the murdered, the physically or mentally injured, the kidnapped, the women who lost children and parents and partners, all the women awake at night, experiencing the terrors of Shabbat on their bodies and souls, the girls who lost their childhood and were taken away from them. I am here to make their voices heard. It's working? Where am I supposed to see it? Okay. On October 6th, there was a ceasefire. It was actually Simchat Torah. Jewish families were celebrating it. But on 6:30 a.m., on the Black Saturday, some 5,000 missiles were launched to Israel in order to allow the well-trained Nukhba terrorists cross the fence to begin the trail of slaughter. On October 7th, Israel suffered the most brutal massacre since the Holocaust. The atrocities committed by Hamas were more barbaric than ISIS. Some say crueler and more barbaric than the Nazis. Babies were murdered and beheaded. Families were bound together and burned alive. Children were executed in front of their parents, and parents in front of their children. The attack claimed the lives of more than 1,194 men, women, and children. At least 800 of them were civilians. They left over 4,000, almost 5,000 people physically wounded, and more than, listen to this, 243 people were taken hostage. In comparison to Canada's population, it means that there would be 1,080 people kidnapped and 4,450 people murdered. That's in comparison. Since October 7th, at least 21 hostages were murdered by Hamas or Jihad. One hostage was rescued by the IDF, and 109 hostages were released in negotiations. As we speak, 136 people are still in captive. Even at this early stage, at the most complex investigation in the history of Israel, the evidence we have reveals that women and girls were the victims of rape and other forms of gender-based violence on October 7th. Women's bodies became part of the battlefield. These were not merely sick, spur-of-the-moment decisions to defile and mutilate Israeli women and girls and men, to parade their naked bodies in the street while onlookers cheered. This was premeditated, planned, instructed. They were given strong drugs before going on their murderous journey to avoid all inhibitions. This is the enemy that we are facing, that the world is facing. And this is exactly why today's events is at the utmost importance. And in the face of the most violent, widespread, gender-based violence assault in recent history, a silencing and gaslighting industry thrives, run by organizations whose motto is equality, peace, and protection to all. Well, me too, except if you're a Jew. This group was not content in simply overlooking the disaster, but rather actively works to question the facts. For instance, UNICEF, they're in charge of prosperity and health and of all children. I didn't realize this is so far from me. Just a second. Can you hear me? I'm reading to you from a declaration they published. Let's do a guided reading on November 5th of November 2020. For almost a month, the world has been watching the unfolding situation in Israel. I feel like yelling. It's good. The world has been watching the unfolding situation in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory in shock and horror at the spiraling numbers of lives lost and torn apart. In Israel, some 14,000 people have been killed. No one killed them, they were killed. And thousands have been injured, according to the Israeli authorities. More than 200 people, including children, have been taken hostage. Rockets continue to traumatize families. The rockets do not only traumatize family, they do a lot more than that. Tens of thousands of people have been displaced. This is horrific. However, the horrific killings, Israelis are killed, Palestinians are horrifically being killed, of even more civilians in Gaza is an outrage. I didn't hear that about Israelis. And this goes on in every statement of UNICEF. And this is about children, right? Let's go on. See, World Health Organization. I'll be needing it. And you can see, can you see the tweets? You can see how they're divided. And my presentation, I forgot to say, is accompanied by illustrations of Guy Mourad. He's an Israeli illustrator that, I can talk for hours, but one illustration of his says it all. This is an illustration he did on International Children's Day, and then you see that a family member of a kidnapped baby, we talked about before, was just, I can't say celebrated. He's in captive on his first year's birthday. And the Director General of the UN is saying, why are you bumming us out? That's in regard to UNICEF. World Health Organization, right? You'd think they'd be. So no, as you can see, condemning Hamas to statements, that's the green. Gaza humanitarian, that's important, 50 tweets, the balance is 12, and then you can see the black is against Israel. Only two statements of the World Health Organization in regard to hostages. And UN Women, I say as a feminist, I myself met the director, and in my prior position, director of UN Women. She's Jordanian. We would, laugh. We're sisters. We work together. We combat violence. But no, at the minute this happened, she turned her back on us. And you can see condemning Hamas terror, 0. Hostages, 0. Gaza humanitarian, that's the yellow part. That's important. Against Israel. You see, that's the black part, and the balance is the gray. Just a second. I don't need this anymore. So, Israelis are abandoned by the international community, as you can see. It turns out that Jewish women, who for years were partners in formulating the rules of the game of combating gender violence and of solidarity in general, and female solidarity in particular, are not allowed to participate in the game itself. That's what makes this moment so critical. We have come so far in establishing that rape cannot be seen as a lesser crime. And we have come so far in believing survivors of sexual assault in so many situations. That's why the silence of these war crimes is so dangerous. It threatens to undo decades of progress and undo an entire movement. This goes beyond politics. If we can't agree that rape is wrong, then we have accepted the unacceptable. Israel is now conducting the largest and most complex criminal investigation in its history. Overwhelming universal skepticism shows a complete lack of understanding of the situation. Hardly any survivors, as they were mostly killed or taken hostage. Hardly any forensics. Bodies were burned, remained in the battlefield for days, had to be removed under fire, and the Jewish tradition which demands the immediate burial. And of course, the relatively short span of time. And it's important to say when I speak about gender-based violence, it's not only rape, it's mutilation, it's humiliation in regard to sexuality or gender. Oh, sorry. So I will go through the evidential status, and it's really important for me to give you this brief so you can also talk about it. And I'm giving you only information that has been verified either by government or things that I've seen with my own eyes or heard with my ears. Again, I'm a criminal prosecutor. And there's a lot of fake out there, and we need to be very careful with what we say, because it will backlash when it, and we've seen it happen. So what I'm saying is the most up-to-date and, again, verified data, information that we have now. So, in regard to testimonies, survivors, it has been reported that there are 5 survivors, one of them a man, who reached out to social services and mental treatment and identified themselves as victims of gender-based violence. They're all from the Nova Party. They have not spoken out yet. They are not given testimony in the police. They're in a very bad mental situation. In addition, there are 2 direct testimonies. one of a soldier that said she was asked repeatedly to take off her clothes when she was alone in the room with one of the terrorists who invaded her base where she served. The second of a released hostage that talked about being touched on her upper intimate body parts. Those are the direct testimonies that we have up until now of survivors. Eyewitnesses. There are at least 6 direct testimonies of survivors of the Nova Party massacre that witnessed rapes and gang rapes. They all reported that the victims were murdered after or during these attacks. Hostages. There have been at least 3 testimonies of released hostages that said that the hostages are subject to sexual assault in captive. There were also statements made by the US and Israel officials confirming that there is a concern that Hamas is reluctant to release the remaining hostages for this reason exactly. First responders, numerous testimonies and footage of bodies that are positioned, bruised, and fully or partly undressed in a way that leaves no question marks. And finally, medical and mental health officials that either dealt with bodies or approached by survivors. That's in regard to testimonies. I have brought to I'll read part of it to you. I saw the terrorist bending her over, raping her, and simply passing her on to the next. She was alive when they raped her. She was on her feet, bleeding from her back. He pulled her hair. He shot her in the head while raping her. Didn't even lift his pants. They cut off her breast and played with it. This is a first-hand account of rape perpetrated by Hamas terrorists giving to the Israeli police. This is another testimony. In one house, there was a couple tied to each other with their clothes down, and you can definitely see that the woman underwent rape. When she is naked, face down, and her clothes had clearly been taken off, not by her, that's a woman who underwent rape. This is from a first responder. Sorry, another one. I see 2 girls, teenagers, I guess 13 or 14. One is laying on the floor, on her stomach. Her pants are pulled down towards her knees, and there's a bullet wound on the back side of her neck, near her head. And there's a puddle of blood around her head, and there's the remain of semen on the lower part of her back. That's another first responder. I remind you that there are people who are here that can help you if you feel that this is too much for you. Footage. There's endless materials from these different sources, which all you have to watch and to listen to. That's also important. I myself have been watching endless Telegram Hamas channels and materials that keep coming from Gaza itself. Footage from GoPros, from private phones. First responders were at some period started to record, and so on. I can say that in the 3 main areas where this terror attack took place, the Nova Party, the kibbutzim, and the bases, you can see the same fingerprint in regard to gender-based violence. Bleeding pelvises, and partly or fully people, mainly women, dressed, taken their clothes off. These are hard pictures, I'm sorry. This is the body of a woman that was found at the site of the party in Kibbutz Re'im. Face and half of her body burned. Torn skirt pushed over her waist. Legs spread, no underwear. Deep gashes in her thigh. In the other picture you see two bodies. Body of an Israeli woman, stripped naked alongside a dead IDF soldier. In a video posted in the official Telegram channel of Hamas. On the left is or on your right, two bleeding pelvises in the Nova scene, in the Nova party scene, and 19-year-old Nama brought to this jeep, and you can see her bleeding from the back. And when you see the same pictures in different scenes, there's no explanation to it. I remember in regard to Nama and her friends that also have same images, we thought, well, maybe they sat on their blood. We were looking. You can imagine that we did not want to believe that these things happen. We were looking for other explanations, and God knows we heard a lot of explanations. But when you see the same pictures everywhere, you understand how planned this was, and this is what they came to do. This is Shani Luke. Her body is in Gaza. She was kidnapped. She was paraded, you see, with her clothes off in Gaza. In the movie, I don't know if you've seen it. Don't see it. They're spinning at her, pushing her, abusing her. But she knows. We know now that she is not alive. In the terrorist interrogations, there are many terrorists in Israel and arrest. Their testimonies leave no doubt that there was a premeditated plan to murder, to torture, and capture civilians, including children and the elderly. There was a guide found, a written guide, on how to pronounce words in Hebrew, in Arabic letters, to give orders to the people they captured, including the demand to take your clothes off. Footage from the terrorists themselves, leaving the bodies of live people bleeding from their pelvic areas. And if we take a minute to think about it, they burn babies alive, cut off children's head. They hold abductees until this moment in conditions of starvation. What makes anyone think that rape is a red line that they won't cross? In regard to the forensic science, I will read you a short part of the testimony of Sherry. She's a volunteer in the IDF, but I can't see the last part, so maybe you will read it. Do you see me? Oh, thank you. Many young women arrived in bloody, shredded rags or just in underwear, and their underwear was often very bloody. Our team commander saw several soldiers who were shot in the crotch and intimate areas in their vaginas. The silence of organizations and the international bodies responsible for women's rights is a stab in the back, but is also a call to action, an examination of leadership. And in the midst of the great darkness that had descended upon us, we have the heavy responsibility, all of us, to turn on a small light. because as we know, a small light removes much of the darkness. So I say today to you, and to all those who lowered the flag of solidarity and the struggle against violence to the bottom of a flagpole and waved Hamas flags under them, our voices will be heard, loud, bright, and clear. Thank you.
I think we all need to just take a moment. Well, good evening, everyone who's here tonight, and to everyone who's watching remotely. I think we have over 200 people, including some people in Israel where it's 3 a.m. I've had the pleasure to get to know Ayelet a little bit over the last few days, and I am really honored to be moderating this conversation. When Al Benarash asked me to participate, I immediately said yes, because I had been feeling so helpless since the attacks of October 7th, and I felt I needed to do something to raise awareness and show my support for the victims, but I didn't know how. And I know many of you feel the same way, and just, we hope to leave shocked, better educated, and maybe with a plan as to how we can raise awareness so the voices of the women who've been affected are heard, and sexual violence in the context of war is understood and condemned. I want to say a heartfelt thank you to Jewish Child and Family Service for initiating this event. It was a ton of work, and it's not really what they do, but taking action is what we're all about, so thank you. I have dear friends and colleagues and family in Israel who've been directly impacted, and this is very personal for me. Of course, many of you know my dear friend Leslie Kaufman, who I went to law school here at University of Manitoba with. Her daughter survived the slaughter at the Nova Music Festival, and I just, when I see these images, I can't help think what a miracle it was that she survived and avoided the fate of so many others. But that image of what could have happened just doesn't leave my brain. And I'm very grateful that we have the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, which my father, Izzy Asper, envisioned would be a place where we'd come together to learn and to have respectful conversations about difficult topics. And most importantly, take action to make the world a more humane and peaceful place. So I cannot think of a better venue for this discussion. Now, I think you all know that when you were registering, you were asked if you had any questions to please let us know and send in your questions. And so, of course, we do have a number of questions, and we've tried to organize them into topics, and also there were many that weren't relevant to this discussion, so I will say that Ayelet will be, and she may not even be capable of answering them, so if you don't hear your question, that was probably why, but Ayelet will be here after to discuss these things. And we're going to get started with our conversation, and as Al said, we're going to try to wrap things up by about, I think we could do it by 8:30, and then there'll be time afterwards for conversations over fruit, coffee, dessert, and so on. And I also want to remind everybody that the event is being recorded, so it can be viewed by those who couldn't watch tonight. Okay. Ayelet, you are not representing the government of Israel. You are an ordinary lawyer, civilian person. What compelled you to jump on a plane and make the long journey to Winnipeg to share this story, these horrific stories?
Well, honestly, I did not know it's such a long flight. Second of all, this became my life mission, I guess. I understand that I have this added value with my expertise as a criminal prosecutor, as an expert on victims' rights. Unfortunately, I say this unfortunately, I see these movies and I see the indications to sexual assault. I see things that other people do not see, especially people who are not trained to see them. Like, for instance, these movies that are now, there's a lot of materials that are being brought from Gaza to be searched, to look for hostages, to look for terrorists, and to get information about what's happening. And that's how they're viewed by professionals, that's their expertise, identifying the terrorists, understanding things about the hostages. But when I see these movies, I see what I see. It's a kind of a selective vision I wish I didn't have, but I understand I have it, and not many other people have them. And this can help bring justice to the victims, to be able to give us more information, to tell the story historically. So this is what I do. I try to keep my eyes on the mission, and this is part of it, being able to tell, to brief whoever is willing to hear and give them the information that we have now about what happened. And I hope, I expect, I ask of you to take this information that I've been trying to give you and keep telling the story further to your family, to your friends, to the people at work, to your politicians, to the journalists you know, to repost, to respond to posts, and not let them take control of the, or put, give light to all the fake, not to give light on the fake, to fill the help me here, yeah. To bring the truth, the truth to light with this information.
On a personal level, and as a feminist, how did seeing what happened and how did the world silence impact you personally? Especially, like, I know you're angry, you reported on the silence of the women's groups, and this was, days after the attacks, not like it was before Israel started doing anything. Yeah. But how did that affect your relationship with these groups?
Well, I'm heartbroken. October 7th shattered many pieces of my identity as a mother, as a Jew, as a Zionist, and also as a feminist. I truly, in all my heart, believe that there's this woman's solidarity, sisterhood, on every travel, either personal or professionally. I would insist on going to a shelter, to a rape crisis center, meeting feminist groups, and I was always amazed, like I told you before, with the meeting of the director of UN Women. I was always amazed at how we speak the same language, we share the same challenges wherever we go. And then this happened, and then there's silence, or that silence is the better case. There's condemning Israel, that's the other side. And I really can't understand, we do not deserve protection? What does this mean, that there's some people who will not be supported? It means so many things about such strong beliefs I had in the world that I'm heartbroken. I'm heartbroken, and I really don't know what it means about, I'm still a feminist. I didn't change. They changed the rules on me, so I don't know, but
It's hard. Does seeing what you've seen traumatize you?
It sure has. I am very, I'm very supported by my husband, my family. I live in a kibbutz myself. I have a very strong community. But yeah, there's many things that are, trigger me like anyone else. Simple things like Shabbat morning. Every Shabbat morning I wake up not, happy, and that's, I get to spend the day with my family. It's like something is sitting on my heart. There's war now, and every 6 in the morning you get lists of soldiers that are killed. That's sick, I am jet lagged, but I stay awake to see the list, to see that, to remember the names. So yes, it's very traumatizing, but I guess I have resilience, my own personal resilience, and again, it's the sense of the mission, and that I know that I'm the person who can do this. So I have to do it. I can't break. I don't have that privilege.
Well, thank you, and I hope that you feel love and support from people here, and our gratitude.
I do. I have to say, I'm worried about that. I mean, look at you all. This is giving me strength, and knowing that what I'm doing is important. And the hug that I've received here is unimaginable. And thank you so much. I'm grateful, and it's heartwarming for everything you're doing, and also this. So, thank you.
I thought this was an interesting question. Does what happened in Israel on the other side of the world matter here, and what relevance do these attacks have on us?
Well, I guess that's a question to you, but I can say from what I'm sensing in the days that I'm here, and also from what I saw that Al talked about the mission that I led to New York and to the UN, and we met with Jewish communities there. It was eye-opening to understand how immediately you all are affected by what is happening in Israel. And I don't know if you all realize this, but I've been talking and meeting with many people, and I hear the trauma. I hear the fear. I hear the lack of sense of security and safeguard. Someone told me that they actually started thinking, if something like this happened, where they hide their children. They're sitting in their living room. This can happen any minute. Some of you, at least, are traumatized just as I am. I mean, and this, first of all, is something you need to be aware of. And I understand you have very strong support and services to lean on. And it's also something that needs to be talked about. It's important that you realize it and talk about it to each other, and make sure that also the authorities know about it. I had a conversation today with the Minister of Foreign Affairs here in Canada.
Melanie Joly.
Yes.
With Global Affairs.
She reached out to talk to me in regard to this event. And I talked to her about the rise of anti-Semitism that I sense, and I talked to her about the traumatized community that I met. And this is something that the government needs to give notice to and invest resources in. And she was very attentive to that. But you need to realize it first.
We're talking a lot about very, very challenging things and witnesses and testimony, and one person was wondering whether it's possible to communicate the reality of the atrocities to people who don't believe it, or deniers, but without re-victimizing the victims, because they obviously play a huge role, or their families play a huge role, or the first responders play a huge role. So I'm sure this is more along the lines of your work in sexual assault counseling and things that you've seen over the years.
Well, first of all, people who don't want to believe will not believe. You know, we hear people saying, well, the movies are AI, and, you hear all these conspiracies. So anyone who doesn't believe, who doesn't want to believe, will not believe. My aim, your aim, is to get to those people who either do not understand or are ignorant to this, and that's where we can move the, make impact and change. I forgot the word, but you understand, right?
Yeah. People's perspectives.
Perspectives, thank you. I'm very jet-lagged. But the question was about how we can talk about this without, in respect to the privacy and discretion of victims. And I'll say I don't have an answer. There's no one answer to this. It is important, and from the rape crisis centers, it's the utmost importance to make anything we can, do anything we can to support victims and to make them feel safe and guarded and not trigger them. And not necessarily on the other hand, but another important public interest is telling this story, historically, legally, and it is not, I mean, you need to give it some thought, but you need to adjust the story and the information you give to the audience and their influence, the potential of influence. For instance, there's the 45-minute movie. We talked about this this afternoon. I don't think this is something that should be open to all public. It is very traumatizing.
Sorry, can you need to elaborate on what the,
Sorry.
For some of us, we've all heard of the infamous 47-minute films, but go ahead and tell what that is.
It's a movie that, it's a collection of clips from the different footage that I talked about before, mainly from the GoPros of the Hamas terrorists that show the atrocities of all the cruelty and barbarism and cruel creativity, that everything, you see everything there. And it's very traumatizing. It is important that the director of UN Women sees this movie. It is important that attorneys that come on a mission to Israel see this movie. I do not think it's important that, I think it's too much for audience this is not their profession to see this. But you have to figure out what to say and to whom in regard to how potentially influential it is for them to know this information.
Yeah, my friend Leslie just saw that film and she had to look away for half of it, and simply because it's real.
It is.
And it's not just a horror movie, and so it's gut-wrenching, but she was of the view that everybody should see it, so I think
But she's a professional. This is what she does. She's an international law,
Yeah. So what mental health resources and programs are Israelis getting access to deal with their collective trauma? That's one of the questions. And can victims be helped to overcome the trauma of sexual violence in particular? I know this is probably a long answer, but I think the whole country's needing trauma counseling.
Yes, 9 million people. First of all, this kind of trauma is something that you cannot recover, but you can lead a life along this trauma. I hear sometimes people talking about the hostages and saying something about how can they continue living after what they've been through. And it is very hard, and I can even imagine what they're going through, but it is important that they keep living and they can have a good life if they are treated. And it's important for me to say this, and I say this also from my experience in the rape crisis centers, that people have survived the most horrible acts made by men, and they have and lead a good life if they're treated. And it's important they get treatment and be aware of all time how they feel and if they need more support. So it is possible and it's important that they get treated. There are different, first of all, the ministries, it's mainly health and welfare, have the understanding, that this is something that we didn't deal with ever in these capacities. There are unique special programs for sexual assault victims, and what's special is that they do more reaching out. They didn't do this before. They go to the, for instance, Nova Party survivors. They have like these not retreats, but places where they get therapy and all that, and they work with them. And there's different programs. I'm not the specialist on that. That's not what I've been focusing since October 7th. But there are unique protocols and treatment, and because of the understanding that this happened and that survivors might not ever speak about it openly, they try to create trauma-informed environments where they feel that they can bring their story, or at least the symptoms of trauma, to be dealt with and treated.
And I suppose the first responders, there's going to be a lot of them who need a lot of help.
Yes. Yes. Also, civil society is taking a leading role, I'd say, even more than government, in many of these missions of resilience and treating trauma. Yes, and again, we're still at war. Many of the first responders in the army are now still in combat. I mean, they didn't even have the time to stop and to even realize what happened to them. This is October 7th is still happening, especially if we have hostages still in Gaza. So it hasn't ended.
Is there anything more about the hostages that you wanted to add, or I think the worry is whether the most the ones that have been most abused won't be coming back.
I don't know. I cannot believe that. I try to be very hopeful on the safe return of all of them. I'm hearing, or I hope it's not only wishful thinking. There's some negotiations that seem to be more serious than the ones before, since the last release of the hostages. But every day that goes by makes them in bigger danger, graver danger. Yesterday there was a very dramatic discussion in Parliament where released hostages gave testimonies about what hostages are going through in respect to gender-based violence, and it's all that we thought. There is a grave concern that some of them might be pregnant, and we just need to bring them back home as soon as possible. I can't stress that enough. They need to be home. You have 2 babies there, right?
We had a question regarding the fact that they've seen images on television, videos of the Israel Defense Forces forcing Gazan prisoners, men, women, and children to strip. And is this justified in light of the sexual violence on October 7th? And does one act of sexual violence demand or absolve another?
Breathing. I cannot even understand how this can be put in the same level.
Hey, don't shoot the messenger. I am
Oh,
only
no.
delivering
I'm not shooting
questions.
anyone. I'm happy here. Look at me. I'm a lawyer. I'm happy for the question because it is important. If someone thought this is in any way something to compare to, then I'm happy to try to convince otherwise. On October 7th, terrorists invaded people's houses, stripped them, and abused them. As I said, I will not repeat that. What they're talking about is a war zone where IDF for days demanded will be evacuated in regard to there's going to be combat. They're coming to this area, so it needs to be evacuated. And they stressed that, you see the flyers, and they stressed that anyone who will be there will be suspected, will be found there after this and that date, will be suspected as a terrorist. So if you find someone there, you suspect he's a terrorist. And if he's a terrorist, you might be armed. So yes, they were stripped. And then they were given suits. You can see the pictures. And they were given suits, but you need to clear them from, having armor or anything. It is not something to compare to people who are sitting in their homes and then they're terrorists invading their houses, and there's no justification to stripping them except for humiliating them and abusing them. So there's no place to comparison to this.
Okay. Thank you. We have some questions about, of course, about taking action. This is I think the act of understanding and hearing what actually happened, and understanding and sharing that information is important. But of course, we do want to know what our role is, what action can be taken. Now, there was just a technical question somebody asked about, is there a central Canadian point for when we need to report anti-Israel activity and incidents here? And I'm just going to say that I think, reporting it to, it depends on the level. I mean, if it's a criminal act, you report it to the police, but the Jewish Federation would probably be a good clearinghouse to get it to the right organizations who need to know about this, or CIJA, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. And another question was, are there places we can donate to support the victims? And again, I'm just going to throw that back to the Jewish Federation did launch a big campaign, and a lot of the money is going to Israel. There's the Jewish Agency has funds for victims of terror and post-trauma care and rehabilitation. Again, following on the idea of hope that with proper rehabilitation and support, people can be can recover.
Definitely.
And there's trauma relief and psychosocial care as well. So I would say, if you're looking just for donations, that's a good way to start. But we've just got a few minutes left, and I just wanted to ask you, how can we, just to reconfirm, how can we be more helpful, and what are the takeaways that you would like this audience and all the people who are watching and all the people who will watch when we send them the recordings, what you would like them to be doing? We would like, I think, I can't speak for everybody, but a lot of people here would like to be in this, on this team. But we need direction and leadership. And it's interesting, I'm sorry to go on about this, but one of the things we celebrate in the Human Rights Museum is the idea of the ordinary person doing extraordinary things. We cannot always just hope that it's going to be our leaders or our rock stars or celebrities. It's this ordinary person doing something extraordinary. JCFS is an ordinary organization with a different mandate, but doing extraordinary leadership as well. So for those of us who want some more direction, this is your opportunity, and then we'll wrap things up.
Well, I think I touched on it, but I'll say that again. I think, first of all, learn the facts. It's important. From official government, Israeli government, or learn the facts. It's important not to spread fake, because that really backlashes and it harms us, and it's important for me to stress that. And first I'll say, speak out. Like I said, family dinners, friends, workplace, even responding to a post or posting or tweeting or whatever. Let people know that you are, first of all, involved in this, and second of all, that you speak up for Jewish people, Israeli people, Jewish women. Even wearing this ribbon is speaking out. And wearing the release the hostages. Yes, I have a hole in my heart. This is my instead. But to keep this subject on the table all the time. Use your circles of influence to take action, to make others take action. If it's your politicians, the journalists you know, the health clinic you're invested in that didn't say anything about this. Three, I heard about that. See where you can influence and any circles that you have. That's, that's what I...
And I think if you do anything that you do in your life, if you do it with attention to the facts and with honesty and with authenticity, I think that does resonate with people, and they'll listen.
And one more thing.
Go ahead.
Very important.
We have 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's 30 seconds. In regard to what Al said, support victims in your community. Support them, validate what they've been through. Obviously we don't have anyone else except each other. So it's important to do that also.
Ayelet, I just want to say what an inspiration you are. This isn't your job, and you've taken it on, and I think it's an inspiration to all of us that whatever human rights issues are out there, we all have a responsibility to take action, and that's the message of the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. And so thank you for being here and for enlightening us all tonight.
Thank you. Just one more thing.
She has one more thing.
Yeah, I can't finish without saying this. Let's pray for the quick and safe return of the hostages and soldiers, and for peace and prosperity for all. Oseh shalom b'momav v'yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imo amen.
Amen.
Amazing. If you'll bear with me, I'm going to go off script for about 90 seconds here. The therapist in me has to come out. One thing we spoke about, Ayelet, as well, is that most of these atrocities are going to be impossible to prosecute and to indict and to see through to completion. And I, having worked for many, many years with sexual abuse survivors, rape survivors, there's something about that process that brings resolution to a victim. There's something about some closure that happens, and when that is unable to happen, it leaves gaping wounds. And so our talking about this and the validation that we bring to believing those survivors is in and of itself healing for them. So that is very, very important. We've just spent a good part of over an hour talking about a very heavy topic. I'm remiss if I want people to go home or leave here feeling any kind of dissonance of any kind. So bear with me for about 30 to 45 seconds. Those that feel comfortable closing their eyes, by all means. If you can visualize a color, a place, a person, an emotion or a feeling that brings you comfort, that brings you joy, that brings you wholeness, that brings you a sense of completion. I want you to visualize that now. and feel the warmth that it brings over you, and the joy and the feelings of safety. And it's always good for us to cleanse our body by taking a very deep breath in through our mouth. And we hold it for a count of 5, 2, 1, and release it completely. So thank you all for attending this evening, this very important conversation that Ayelet and Gail shared with us, for shining a brave light on this topic. There's much work to be done, but I think we're up to the challenge. To the audience here and online, your attendance and support show us that women matter. Let's find ways to continue this conversation, supporting victims of gender-based violence each and every day. You're welcome to stay. There's some light refreshments here, and for anyone who'd like to maybe approach Gail or Ayelet and have a little bit more, off the sidebar conversation or a question, by all means. There's also our JCFS staff that are here. We mentioned that. They'd also be happy to answer any questions about the services and supports available through Jewish Child and Family Service. And I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't also say you can make a donation tonight in support of our programs that benefit women and girls, and many of you did that online, and we thank you so much. We raised close to $12,000 from this event, from all of you. So if your heart is open a little more this evening, or you'd like to open it up, there is an opportunity in the foyer when you came in. Again, our women matter, our girls matter, all women matter. And again, let's also remember that there are some 132 hostages still held by Hamas in Gaza, and some 12 of those are women. Please, let's pray for their safe return, for an end to the war and to the suffering. And Ayelet already led us through the prayer for peace and for peace. Please drive home safely. Thank you for coming, and have a good evening.